आप सभी का हम स्वागत करते हैं। यह एक महत्वपूर्ण सत्र है क्योंकि आम तौर पर जब दो देशों के बीच में बात होती है तो उनकी शक्ति का आकलन हथियारों से होता है, लेकिन जब दो देशों के बीच में परस्पर संबंध की बात होती है तो संस्कृति, साहित्य, कला हमारे काम आती है। और आज इस सत्र में वही सारे अतिथि अपनी बात कहेंगे, अपने अनुभव को कह सुनाएंगे, जिन्होंने भारत के साथ में अन्य देशों के संबंधों को सांस्कृतिक रूप से विस्तृत और व्यापक बनाने में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दिया है। मुझे अभी याद आती है अमृता प्रीतम की वे पंक्तियाँ, जब वे कहती हैं कि किसी देश की धरती पर कोई आतताई या आतंकी कदम रखता है तो वहाँ मानवता काँपती है, लेकिन जब किसी देश की धरती पर कोई साहित्यकार कदम रखता है तो वहाँ की लाइब्रेरी समृद्ध हो जाती हैं। मैं उम्मीद करता हूँ कि ये जो सत्र है यह वैचारिक दृष्टि से काफ़ी समृद्ध होने वाला है। मैं इस सत्र के अध्यक्षता के लिए बड़े सम्मान के साथ आदरणीय नवतेज सरना जी को आमंत्रित करता हूँ, वे पधारें। साथ ही इस परिचर्चा के वक्ता अमरेंद्र खटवा जी, अंजू रंजन जी और सुरेश गोयल जी को भी मैं मंच पर आमंत्रित करता हूँ। आप सभी विद्वत अतिथियों के स्वागत और अभिनंदन के लिए उन्हें अंग वस्त्र भेंट करने के लिए मैं साहित्य अकादमी के सचिव डॉक्टर के श्रीनिवास राव से आग्रह करता हूं कि वे कृपया पधारें और आप हमारे अतिथियों को अंग वस्त्र प्रदान करें। हमारे साथ मंच पर आदरणीय नवतेज सरना जी हैं, संयुक्त राज्य अमेरिका में भारत के राजदूत, ब्रिटेन में उच्चायुक्त, तो इसराइल में आप राजदूत रहे हैं। आपका जो नवीनतम उपन्यास है क्रिम्सन स्प्रिंग, जिसे 2002 में बेस्ट सेलर होने का खिताब प्राप्त हुआ था। हमारे साथ में आदरणीय अमरेंद्र खटवा जी हैं। आप कई वर्षों से ओडिया, अंग्रेजी, हिंदी और स्पेनिश में लिखते रहे हैं और छपते रहे हैं। 40 से अधिक कविता संग्रह हमारे बीच आपके हैं। हमारे बीच अंजू जी हैं, अंजू रंजन जी भारतीय विदेश सेवा के वरिष्ठ अधिकारी हैं। वर्तमान में आप भारतीय सांस्कृतिक संबंध परिषद, भारत सरकार में उप महानिदेशक के पद पर कार्यरत हैं। भारत की राजनयिक सेवा में 35 से अधिक वर्षों तक अब कार्य करने वाले सुरेश गोयल जी को हम उनके विभिन्न सांस्कृतिक अवदान के कारण जानते हैं। और आप सभी की इस महती उपस्थिति में यह सत्र, जैसा कि मैंने जिक्र किया था, भारत का जो विदेशों के साथ में सांस्कृतिक संबंध है, उस परंपरा को बताने और उसकी दिशा और क्या दशा रही है और आगे भविष्य कितना उन्नत, कितना उज्ज्वल है, यह इस सत्र की हमारा हासिल होगा। मैं सम्मान के साथ में इस सत्र के संचालन सूत्र आदरणीय इस परिचर्चा की अध्यक्षता कर रहे नवतेज सरना जी को सौंपता हूँ। हमारे पास 90 मिनट का समय है, पर्याप्त समय है हमारे अतिथियों के विचारों को जानने के लिए। आप सभी का पुनः स्वागत।
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking Sahitya Academy for getting us all here together. And वो कूल आवाज़ आ रही है लेकिन कूलर ज़्यादा चल रहा है, तो अब ठीक है। गर्मी लगेगी तो मैं चुप हो जाऊंगा, कूलर चला दें। आप आगे आ जाइए, कैमरा पीछे रुक रहा है इतना। इट इज़ नॉट अ वेरी क्राउडेड सेशन, वी हैव अ कोजी बैठक। दैट्स इट। एसी चल रहा है। So, first of all, thanks to Sahitya Academy for this invitation in organizing this subject. We learned a lesson by watching the previous session, and I'm glad this is a small room and a small gathering. We are not going to have speeches, and there's no ghanti to stop anybody. No music will interrupt you, as long as we all continue to make some sort of sense. Given the fact that we have 4 diplomats on the stage, 3 former, 1 present, I think it is better that we have a conversation. Of course, diplomats are supposed to be good at running conversations, hopefully, and we should be able to do that. I would try to initiate this conversation with a few ideas, and then perhaps we can just take it from there, and I leave it to my friends on stage And I think we have 90 minutes, which is a lot of time. We can end earlier and everybody can go home. Yeah, so we won't go 90 minutes, but we will leave enough time for an interaction. I think the Master of Ceremonies who just introduced us mentioned the fact that cultural diplomacy is very, very important. I think that is one of those things which don't need to be repeated because political relations between countries go up and down very often. Economic relations go up and down very often. And sometimes when things are really bad in bilateral relations, the one thing that stays, even if it stays below the surface, is the cultural relations, the people-to-people relations, the love that somebody may have for your literature, for your culture, for your dance, for your food. And that's a constant, which very often we ignore in our quest for being a powerful country. Powerful, taken at a very subliminal level, is basically a lot of arms, a lot of tanks, a lot of aeroplanes, a lot of GDP. So I think it's an appropriate time that we also consider this part, and I'm glad Sahitya Academy is making such an effort. This is called, in modern day terms, in diplomacy, it's called soft power. You don't really hear the word cultural diplomacy so much. It sounds almost Soviet. But when you say soft power, it becomes Americanized. For the last 50 years since Joseph Nye wrote his article on soft power has become the currency. And soft power essentially basically means that a way of influencing people. A country has several ways of influencing people. One is the carrot, which is that, we will give you business, we will give you a trade, so economic inducement. The second is the stick, that you better fall in line, otherwise you know what's going to happen. And the third, which is soft power, is attraction. Country has an inherent attraction, or lack of it. The American soft power, you don't need to. You don't need to keep on talking, saying, America's powerful, America's a big navy, America's a big air force. You just go to Starbucks. You go to McDonald's. I used to call it the syndrome of blue jeans and green cards. Everybody wants to go to America or send their children to America. That is soft power. United Kingdom, royalty, British royalty. The Queen passes, the world comes to a standstill, not just one country. Oxbridge, soft power. They may say these universities are passé, or they're too old, or they're too traditional, but everybody will give his right hand to get a degree from Oxford. So India too has a huge cachet of soft power. And we've seen it in all aspects of culture, whether you talk of literature, as we will do today, but a bit later, whether you talk of our food, whether you talk of our fashions, whether you talk of dance. And now, of course, the International Yoga Day has put the stamp of yoga on India and put India on yoga before it gets taken away by someone else. And we have succeeded in a huge exercise of soft power. On every 21st June, there is an International Yoga Day, which is celebrated in every country. I think you can't have a better example of that. So I think we'll come to literature as a subset of that, but I do want my friends and colleagues here to tell us their idea of soft power, their experiences of soft power. They've all done huge number of postings in different countries, diverse countries, and seen it from headquarters, like Suresh Goyal has as Director General, ICCR. So, Suresh, would you kick this off with comments on soft power? And I'm particularly saving literature for the second round of interactions.
You put me in a spot.
Speak into the mic. Otherwise, we'll put on the cooler.
It was not on. Okay. It is now on. Okay. You have put me in a spot really by asking me to speak immediately after you.
First of all, DG ICCR, you can speak on this.
No, first of all, after what you have said, it's going to be a difficult task to really say anything about soft power, but let me try one or two things. I'm very fond of saying that cultural diplomacy, even though it may sound antiquated, but that cultural diplomacy is somewhat different from projection of soft power or the use of soft power. Simply because I'm a physics student, and for the physics student, power has a different meaning altogether. It is force divided by area, and whatever means that you are actually applying force somewhere. And therefore, power has a connotation that there is a pressure somewhere or the other. Maybe it is benign. Maybe it is not that direct or brutal as the military pressure would be, but there is a pressure somewhere. And second thing is that because I remember that the phraseology's use of soft power came from Joseph Nye, who began to actually popularize soft power as a counter to degradation in the American presence, American influence after the Iraq war. And therefore, they decided to use, bringing a huge lot of economic help, assistance, infrastructure development, so on and so forth, hoping that that kind of an intervention would turn the Iraqi people. It didn't. And therefore, I'm just being cautious of this. I'm not saying that there is a different distinction. But I think the advantage of cultural diplomacy or cultural influences, cultural dialogue, call it whatever you want, is that it actually tries and develop a kind of a, and literature is part of it really, and I'll just explain in a minute, that it develops a kind of a channel where countries can talk to each other without getting into the competitive mode. And that's an important. My example is that, I mean, even at individual level, you will often find that in a conversation between 2 or 3 different people, even if same thing is being said by 2 people, one is listened to more than the other because somehow there is greater trust in that person. How does it happen? Because people are able to just trust him. It's an implicit thing. So cultural dialogue builds up trust. That's the most important part of it. I'll give you an example. Literature. Tagore. Now, whichever part of the world you go to, or Vivekananda, or Buddhist literature, pick up any of those.
Suresh, you're stealing my second round of questions.
Am I?
We'll come to literature later.
Okay, no, but I was talking about the ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, I will not use the word literature.
Yeah.
So, all these things really develop a ground where people can talk to each other without getting into a confrontational mode. I'll give you an example. Besides performing arts, which is very good, but USA. I've traveled to USA several times, and at one time the Indian chairs of professors became very, very popular. Now we all compare Confucius centers by China, Indian chairs, and very often it is said, look how many Confucius centers are there, doing such good job, blah, 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 and all those things. In the USA, several universities approached, I'm talking about the past when I was DG ICCR, I really can't claim to know what the situation is now. Stanford University wanted us to establish an Indian chair in the Stanford talking about the Indian politics, political relations. And they wanted somebody to come and they wanted the help of ICCR only in terms of selecting a suitable person. They were prepared to pay for everything, return fare, blah, everything. Now, that was something which was unusual. Not everybody wants ICCR help in locating a teacher, but prepared to pay for everything. It was simply because some of the professors who had gone on the ICCR sponsorship earlier, they had done a great job. Now, that is what I call cultural diplomacy, that we are able to and those professors were not only just doing teaching, they were developing a nucleus of Indian scholarship around those places. So that is one example. Southeast Asia, we used Ramayana as a kind of a central point for developing conversations between scholars from Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and India. But very well. So there are so many examples where we use these ideas. There is another example which I can give, but I think I'm spoken for a long time.
So, thank you. I think we must bring in gender diversity. So.
Thank you, Chair. And speaking in front of all of you is like an honor. And also I'm very much humbled to be here and sharing the stage with you all, which I used to see you on TV. And
I'm sorry.
when I say that, when I went to UK, you had already left 2 months ago. So I couldn't see you, otherwise you would have been my High Commissioner there. So nice to see you here. And then I keep meeting my two eminent DGs, Goyal sir and Katua sir. Now I'm DDG. I hope I'll become DG one day. So yes. So my idea of cultural diplomacy has been a little bit more cleared up when I joined ICCR. Then I saw the different phases of cultural diplomacy here. I handle the part called culture, which include the scholarship, which sir has mentioned, which include the chair, ICCR chair abroad, and it includes the cultural troops outgoing and incoming, cultural delegations, which we send and then we come. Includes the translation, like we translate the major text from abroad and preservation of a lot of ancient text and promotion of Indian yoga and conferences on the Indian culture. We also provide like separate statues and busts and exhibitions based on the Indian culture, and it goes abroad. So these are the various phases of encouraging the cultural interaction between India and the world. So that is the major area of cultural diplomacy. We are thinking to improve the relationship beyond this political and formal setup. So I think...
Yeah. You've actually, Anju, you've actually been Consul General in Scotland.
Yes.
Which is the source of the greatest cultural diplomacy between UK and India.
Yes, sir.
The Scotch whisky.
I was thinking somebody will ask question on that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yes, there are beautiful golf courses, and St. Andrews is called Mecca of that gold.
That's
and
right.
Sir must have gone and played. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So you
yes.
must tell us a bit more in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So let me pass it on
Yes,
to Amrind and tell us all about soft power in the Latin world, perhaps? Whichever.
As far as India is concerned, I believe soft power as a packet of influencing India's position must be studied first. That is because when you are talking about India, you are talking about 450 million middle class who are perpetually in the market of crisis of expectation. You are talking about 550 million poor who have to be subsidized. You have 350 million rich public sector employees, government servants. As some critics says, they don't care. This is horizontally and vertically divided by rich India, poor India, urban India, rural India. Because of this factor, when he's talking about exporting soft power, that is somehow we have to reach out, a global audience. Say yoga has come, Ayurveda has come, performing arts has come, visual arts has come. But when we combine this, does Government of India has a single focus strategy on soft power diplomacy? Two, is one ministry, one department, or one policy maker thinks in ideological terms that how we are going to market Indian soft power diplomacy. Third, GDP. Every country, almost 10% GDP share is soft power exports. As he said, American fast food joints or Scotland Scotch. Have we done that? Like say, for example, today we are exporting lots of things. Have we linked it up through the soft power diplomacy, etc.? Then second part, as he said, I have done lots of work in Latin America. Unfortunately, our soft power diplomacy in Latin America is more spiritual. Say Argentina, as we say, Argentina is Europe suffering in Latin America. They perpetually they are in crisis of comparison. Therefore, they love anything spiritual in India, whether it is yoga, Ayurveda, or dance forms. So therefore, time has come, like ICCR centers there. Through those centers, when we are talking about people are learning dance, we can export lots of textiles related to dance. Lots of musical instruments, related parts through that. So these kind of things will start discussing that India yet does not have a soft power export module. What it has, lots of attempts by many departments, many persons and individuals. True.
Well, I think that's a very, very interesting aspect that you have raised. Does soft power have to be organized? Or is it best left to be floating on its own? Because that also has, in some ways, just to provide a counterpoint, has also been an advantage. When we did not have the economic strength that we have today, we did not have the foreign exchange that we may have today, the soft power still existed. I'll give you two examples, and one, I mean, just because Maria Puri from Poland originally is sitting here, Poland keeps coming to my mind. It was one of my earliest postings where I spent a great 4 years. We did nothing. We didn't have the capacity, we didn't have the resources. But you had, in that relatively small country, 45 branches of the Indo-Polish Friendship Society, which was self-funded or supported by the then communist government. It was in every small town you had, whoever supported it, the crowd, the people who went there were really genuine. They were really interested in Indian languages. There was a huge department of Indology in Warsaw University. I think probably the result is what you saw on the stage in the last session. There were professors who spoke Sanskrit, Punjabi, Malayalam, Bangla. And this was in a way, and in small towns, you find children painting with Indian motifs. Now this was entirely happening on its own. So there was something which, about India, which sort of generates a lot of respect, a lot of, and I think the effort, where you rightly say if we can channelize that and sort of also give it, direction, I think we will have synergized hugely on this. Maybe we will. But unless you want to add something on this, should we move to literature? Yeah.
I want to say something
Yeah,
about the
please.
channelizing part.
Please.
Sir, I wanted to also say that in modern days, the Bollywood and this Indian cinema has become huge. They are representing India rather, and then they are hugely popular. Wherever I go, in Indonesia, I was there, and then they are talking about kuch kuch hota hai. When they see you, they will tease you, saying that kuch kuch hota hai. And also, I think we should capitalize on that.
Suresh, just, I can't lose this opportunity, so if you permit me the chair's discretion, I'll just come in on this Bollywood thing. Anju, it's not new, of course, as you know. Yes, it goes back to Raj Kapoor, and of course Raj Kapoor is legend in Russia Arab worlds, etc. Every taxi driver was humming Awara. But that was my first posting. But there was another story. I think it was Suresh having served as DCM for 4 long years in Cairo, may be able to certify this. There was a story that a lady came to our embassy in Egypt with a suitcase full of money, cash. And she met somebody in the consular sections, whoever went to meet the visitor, and she said, listen, she said, what do you want? He said, I've sold everything I had. All my money is here. I want to marry Amitabh Bachchan.
I'm afraid, I'm afraid it must have happened much before I reached Cairo, and nobody remembered it. But I do remember this hilarious episode. That time I was in Kuala Lumpur, and Amitabh Bachchan and Mr. Ramesh Bhandari, who was at that time with the Congress party, already having retired, and they came to Cairo, and it was actually, I found it extremely surprising and funny. And as Amitabh Bachchan came out of the aircraft, there was no young woman, of course. I mean, nobody wanted to marry him at that time. Suppose, I think he was already married to Jaya Bhaduri at that time. But there were these people, huge number of people who just wanted to prostrate themselves before him, touch his feet. He was like God. But anyway, I was talking about the channelizing of, I think basically, I have found that there are things which can be done well by the government of India. And there are things where the government of India makes a total mess. I think we need to be very careful about where the government of India does things and where it does not do things. And where it cannot do things well, I don't think that it should really even come into this thing. For example, now we were talking about, the government of India channelizing what? Anyway, for example, Bollywood. I don't think the government of India even had Bollywood on its horizon till a few years ago. In fact, most of the people in Delhi, those who were cultural hoity-toities, they would think Bollywood beneath their dignity and say, Bollywood, part of a culture, nah, trash. So I think, number 2, the government of India can do scholarship well. It requires financial resources. It can do chairs very well. But let me give the examples of chairs. Wherever you have the question, and I hope that, is it being recorded here?
Yes.
It is being relayed. Okay. Anyway, I'm retired already, therefore I don't run great danger. When I was DG ICCR, the system of chairs, after starting very well, soon became a kind of an employment platform. So we had to be very strict about, so that was something where we prefer to go to the university directly, select without any intervention as much as we could. But performing arts festivals, I think the kind of outlay that is required, the government of India role becomes very important because no private organization can provide the kind of funding that you need for.
Right, you're absolutely right. There are some things which, we need to channelize, we need to organize, some things which happen on their own, and also depends upon the target destinations. For instance, in the West, you don't need to do much at a government embassy level because the community does a lot. And you just have to piggyback that effort. In other smaller countries, more or less likely destinations, you have to do much more. But I'm now just going to sort of bring this down to the subset of literature, which is what our brief was. And I think we've heard a lot about what the problems of Indian literature being used as a tool of software, of soft power. And I'm not going to speak a moment myself. I'll come in later. I'm going to request Amarinder as an eminent writer himself to talk.
Before I start, say for example, you are talking about the channelization. Say we have Smita Nagdev here, sitar player. She has a French constituency, ready-made French constituency. That is how pockets are being developed. Now let's talk about literature. If you know, there are 12 Nobel Prize winners globally who have worked as diplomats in their career. 2, as Octavio Paz said, literature needs, 1, your understanding the social realities, your doubts and movement of ideas. 2, you pick up a concept of movable space and time, not constant space and time, as Professor Shiva Prakash will agree, because that is very difficult to interpret in transitional norms of acceptable daily literature. 3, how you develop the concept and finalize the story. As a diplomat, I'm writing much before I joined diplomacy. I'm publishing since I was 10-year-old. But when I'm talking about diplomacy and literature, 3-4 elements which Navtej is going to raise. How I'm influenced by my career or diplomacy to write literature. How literature can influence diplomatic activities and relationship between countries. 3, globalization aspect of literature. 4th, personal experience. Let me start with my personal experience. I have been posted in Pakistan, in Moscow, in Argentina, in Ivory Coast, Africa, and I come from a rural area in Odisha. I write poetry. I have almost 40-50 publications. I have 2 books in Spanish. What my diplomatic career has taught me to put in literature are 2-3 things. 1, a feeling of being and nothingness. That every time I move from one place to the other, there are many things new comes to me. When I discover those things new, I discover, yes, in my existential thinking there are some gaps. Those comes into my poetry. I miss my village more. I miss my dead great-grandfather who waited for 3 days, saw me and died in 10 minutes when I came from Spain, more. Those kind of things. Then 2, it also gives me nuances. So when I read lots of writers of foreign countries where I have been posted, certain things touches like Carlos Fuentes. He talks about exactly like Indian rural scenario in his novels. But the interpersonal relationship is completely different there. Sometimes that also comes in. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, while I continue my writing, lots of inputs, experiences and events have come into my literary activities.
Apoli, on your poetry, do you agree with what has been said as another poet?
I get some ideas from him about how I should improve.
But from
my
your
writing.
postings, from your...
Yeah, I think the diplomats are becoming the, sir, you mentioned that out of the 12, so many diplomats have got the Nobel Prize. You know why? Because we all get to study a language compulsorily. We start our career with a language training. So my language training was Bhasa Indonesia. So I studied Bhasa for 1 year. I became very proficient in Bhasa. I could talk a lot and read and write and then kind of write stories also in Bhasa Indonesia. So I did Bhasa Indonesia for 2 years. I went to the advanced level also. And that gave me the chances to travel with ambassador and translating for her. Navrekha Sharma was my ambassador. So kept translating things for her and all. And as you mentioned that when you travel so many nuances you come across in the literature and all. The similarity between India and Indonesia, when you come across the Indonesian literature, that will like really mesmerize you, amaze you. So when I went to the junction of Indonesia and now it is Papua New Guinea, Irian Jaya, I saw a very, very strange practice that the children were there and they were sitting on a tree, and to impress us, they were picking up the insect, the butterfly, the dragonfly, and eating it. And so I was like too much shocked. And when I came back, they said, no, they are like malnourished. They don't have any protein source. So there is no food except that they are having some kind of sweet potato and then some roots they grow. So that's why they are eating this thing. So, so many things touches you actually. This is one of the example. When I went to Scotland, I saw that I was knowing very vaguely about Robert Burns. So when I went there, the first minister said that you should visit the Ayrshire. I said, what is there? Ayrshire was the birthplace of the famous Scottish poet Robert Burns. So I said, okay, I'll go and then visit. Once I visited that place, it really touched me. The 17th century Europe was much like 19th century India, similar. They also believed in a lot of superstitions, ghost stories, and all these things. When I started reading Robert Burns, you see that that time so many, like in India we call the witchcraft, and so many things were practiced which is now practiced in India, like in the rural areas even now. And that inspired me to translate Robert Burns into Hindi. And the Burn Museum has been kind enough. They have promised that that book will be kept in the Burn Museum. There's only Hindi translation of Robert Burns. It has already been translated into 50 other languages. I'm trying my best for the first time to do it in Hindi.
Wonderful.
So,
Wonderful. Well, I think you should be all aware that we are, as writer diplomats, we are heir to a great tradition.
yes,
Writer diplomat tradition, particularly in Europe, in Latin America, goes down centuries.
yes.
I mean, you have people like Chaucer, you have people like
Yeah.
Boccaccio, you have Pablo Neruda, Octavio Paz has been mentioned, Giorgos Seferis, the Greek
all the
ambassador
diplomats,
poet.
yes, yes.
So there's a huge tradition. There's also a tradition of a lot of diplomats who are frustrated writers, who don't actually, they spend all their literary genius on political dispatches and telegrams and drafting and redrafting those.
Yes.
Well, there's a famous American diplomat, George Kennan, who's all his life, one of his passions was to write a biography of Chekhov.
Yeah.
And he never did. And you'd never imagine the old folks, the Soviet foreign minister Gromyko, Andrei Gromyko, who was there for 50 years. When a British ambassador went in with a protest note, he responded with a quote, with an English poem of Kipling from memory. So, so there are a lot of traditions. I think what you said about being in nothingness,
Yeah.
I would add to that a sense of restlessness,
Yes.
which is common to a diplomat and a writer.
Entity kind of, you say.
Yeah, there's a restlessness because there is a lack of permanence. There's also a lot of exposure, which you wouldn't do otherwise.
Yes.
And certainly there are things which you end up writing simply because you had the opportunity to be a diplomat. That's at
Yes,
least
yes.
has
We are
been
lucky
my
enough,
personal
yes,
experience, and we are glad for that. But if I just to broaden it as literature as a tool of diplomacy.
Can I just, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's, we can come to that in a moment. I think the greatest example of literature working on relationship between two countries, who can forget Victoria Ocampo and Tagore? You read the letters exchanged between the two of them, and they are so full of life and they're so full of understanding for each other. Argentinian lady, a Bengali gentleman there, the kind of sensitivity you see in the communication. That's a sensitivity, yeah. That is reflected in the communication that shows how they have been influenced and how they have been able to understand each other through the writing. I just want to give you one example. I was in Cairo for 4 years. One of the best writers in Cairo, prose of course, has been Naguib. Naguib Mahfouz. And he has written a lot, not about India, but he has written a lot about Cairo early history, Egyptian early history. He was a socialist bent of mind. Poverty there, how it impacted on the policies, how it actually brought out from Egypt He's talking about Nasser, why Egypt became socialist, etc. If you want to understand what Egypt was all about in the 50s, all you need to do is read Najib Mahfouz, and you will know it. And therefore, for a diplomat who is working on relationship, say between India and Egypt, it becomes an essential part of the reading, literature.
So we've had Tagore and we've heard about Tagore in the previous session. And I mean, beyond Tagore, have we been able to really use Indian literature to the soft power extent that we could have? That's my question. I know we have had moments. We've had a Tagore moment, Gitanjali Nobel Prize moment. We've had a Rushdie moment. We have maybe a half a moment of Arundhati Roy. We've had a Gitanjali Shri moment, but Amitav Ghosh moment. But these are again primarily Indians writing in English, except for the last Booker. Have we really, given the wealth of our literature, have we really been able to use it to the extent possible?
Sir, I was in South Africa.
Boliye.
I was in South Africa and in Johannesburg, and then I saw a lot of impact of Gandhi over there. So that is also one influence. We forget Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, they never met. But they were influencing, like Mahatma Gandhi was influencing Mandela through his literature and the later. And during the apartheid struggle till the 1962, he went through the Gandhian way. That we will not go for any violence, we'll do all our protest peaceful and all. So even Mahatma Gandhi, who was like not a professional writer, but again his literature has influenced in South Africa.
Absolutely, but he's an iconic figure.
Yes.
But for instance, see the Spanish writers. See the way Spanish literature has been translated, influenced, etc.
See Milan Kundera.
Actually,
I think both of you will.
Actually, let me put it there. No, I think there are limitations on use of literature in cultural diplomacy. There are limitations. Literature requires a certain kind of cerebral activity, if I may say so. You need to really compare the metaphors. You need to compare the emotions being reflected, how the words are used. Now, therefore, I've done that in Cairo again and in Johannesburg, where we organize the book discussions and the people of certain caliber, they come together, they discuss the books and everything happens. But that is limited to a certain, it does percolate down because when people with influence and leadership talk to others, it does make an impact. So from that point of view, it is useful, but it is not that intense as performing arts have proved to be in my own map. I'll give you an example again here. I don't have to say anything. When the ASEAN game, it was the 30th year or something, 2012, when we had the summit meeting in Delhi, one of the tasks for the ICCR was to really do the whole year long cultural activities for the summit, and that would climax in one unique cultural performance at the end of it in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. I think you were there. Did you see that? No, I don't know. No, that performance. Usually, what happens is in that cultural performance, every country will come. They will present their own cultural performance, and that's it. And China, when they had the summit the year before that, that presented 90% of Chinese and just 10% of ASEAN, and that was it. What we did was some completely different. We got a group from each country, paired it with an Indian group, put them in one common choreography, 1 hour long, and in that choreography, if you see the video today, nobody will know where ASEAN ended or where ASEAN began. It was all one composite.
So the point you're making is that dance is more effective
No. The point I'm making here is that because of the visuals, whether it is
So it's a visual.
the visual media tends to come together much faster.
The question he raised, Gandhi, Tagore, Vedic literature, Gita, these have been translated all over. Many languages, widely accepted. Why not current day Indian literature? Two, when we are talking about soft power exports, we talk about performing arts, visual arts, intellectual and academic exchanges. We do not include literature there. It has started, but not a big way. Three, Tagore has been translated by 10 Nobel Prize winners, 3 constantly for 20 years and more. Today, our writers, how many we know writers of other countries, personal level or group level or organizational level or governmental level? The point he raised, if there are tremendous novels coming from regional places, Mr. Tiwari, who was chief of Sahitya Academy, has started a movement. The kind of short story they produce in Bihar, you can't believe it. Mind-boggling. Who will translate them? Hindi we are getting them now, but few in Tamil, because Tamil has a group of Dalit literature people. Who will translate them in Spanish? Now time has come. Say, for example, when we talk about diplomacy and literature, when I'm promoting soft power in a country of my posting, should not I think about exporting, transplanting, putting people together for promotion of Indian literature in those countries, those languages?
Absolutely. And I think this was mentioned, I think, Suresh, in your last session, it was mentioned that there should be an agency for translation. So is translation the major obstacle to doing what Amrendra has mentioned? I think that's probably what it comes down to.
Very briefly, translation is one part of it, and I also mentioned there, I think at that time, you've just gone out, not all literature is really, can lend itself to a translation in the sense that you can fully empathize with the people of that country, and I think unless you can empathize, the translation doesn't carry any meaning. But I think what can be done is have an agency, translate your knowledge, books of knowledge. Now I'm saying that you have Vedas, you have this and that, where you are not actually coming to talk about the emotions, but you just simply have what has come from traditional eternity and do that.
Well,
For example, I'll give an example
please.
of Ramayana. Now, if you can translate Ramayana into the different languages of Southeast Asia, where it's a great tradition, in fact, one of the UNESCO studies said that Ramayana probably is the most common book between India and the Southeast Asia. We have had great success achieved in terms of workshops we organized between India and Southeast Asian countries on 2 issues, Ramayana and Buddhism. Nothing else. And they immediately come together.
but I think a lot of translators would differ with you that you can't translate emotion. I think along with the agency, you also need to get trained, excellent translations. Everything has been translated. Every nuance can be translated, more or less.
There have been difficulties, sir. For example, when I was posted in Nepal, Kathmandu, the book of Phanishwarnath Renu was hugely popular because he writes about that area, mostly Madhesi, and also he was in Viratnagar. He was with Koirala families for some time. In fact, he was adopted by them actually. But he himself writes in his autobiography that he was not getting a publisher for his novel, which became like an iconic novel, Maila Aanchal. So why? Because the publishers were like not getting the meaning of those words. He said that for me it was very difficult to translate those meaning into actually Hindi.
Right. So there are limitations.
There are limitations. Translation has its
The only
limitations.
thing I would add is that if emotions could be translated, we wouldn't need translator. ChatGPT would do a good job.
Here I disagree. Emotion you did not translate. Therefore, you have limited concept of space and time to explain it.
Yes.
You don't have to translate completely. There is transliteration. There is representative reflection of literature and story.
You are right, sir.
It has to touch your heart and it sells. Basically that I would say.
I think that's an excellent point where to check whether there are any questions, or should I let this go on? If there are questions, I'd love to turn it over. Yes, please. Questions, comments, please. Yes.
Thank you, Navdeep, for the session. I mean, at least this part of it so wonderfully conducted. I have occasion to cite, I'm not a diplomat, and I have worked in publishing, but I have actually an example to cite where there was a diplomatic intervention by one of our Indian missions abroad. And this was the year 2003, when some kind of a directive had gone out to Indian missions abroad to try and attract foreign direct investment, or at least try and look for the opportunity. It so happened that our embassy in Berlin, the ambassador was Ranga and DCM was Amit. And FICCI was roped in because it was expected that Bertelsmann Group, that's about the third largest media group in the world at that time, was interested in investing. The destination was not. China was putting up a major overture to try and get that. Now, overall, I would not consider publishing as investment, but that group as a whole was, huge. Now, the thing was sent to FICCI, and obviously, Amit also intervened, and Gunther Thielen was then the CEO. I'm just trying to quickly do this. He was the CEO of Bertelsmann. He particularly asked for a presentation on publishing industry and scope. And Romesh Sharma was to do the television thing, and Shradul Shroff was doing the legal aspect. And Amit said that you have to get into this because you're the one. So FICCI invited me, I went. And at the Indian Embassy in Berlin, you will not believe, the seat, as you know, in any kind of diplomatic, we sit opposite sides table, right? So there were only three. Thielen only got two of his directors to come, and he was. And Ranga knocked off all the chairs, So there were just three people, all of us, and suddenly they realized this. And the publishing, we don't have a ministry as such. So INB minister was Ravi Shankar, he came, and you will be surprised to know Vijay Singh was at that time additional secretary. Not yet, he also came. We went,
Let's get
made
to the
that
question.
presentation, I'm going to make the statement. Presentation we made, they decided Champagne was open, and I invited them to come for the 2004. 2004 World Book Fair, Thielen came with his entire entourage and took a decision to open up Random House office here, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Well done.
The point that I want to say is that these are few instances that we have.
So it works.
Thank you.
It works.
Yeah.
So, my question is, when we connect diplomacy and literature, one common thread I find that both try to maximize and minimize both risks and opportunities.
What?
Risks and opportunities. So it's for the country, of course, and the best traction one gets where we have a common cause in that country and ours. For example, in our adolescent days, we read a lot of Russian literature. And that's where a lot of influence on the thinking and even planning one's own life around that. So as diplomats, because you are front-ending the country in different locations, do capture this trend, because now we have because now the Indian diaspora is throughout the world and in significant chunks because of the democratic dividend. For example, in Arabian region, you will have a labor class. And you will have in some America, very elite software professionals. We have our significant chunks of people in different segments. It's not that they're uniform. And how do we connect and have a common cause? Most of them are now second generation, third generation there. And the last point is that a lot of traction is happening in the religious and political literature. Indian religious literature, even the new Babas, Sadhus, their followers, sects, so they are also promoting certain literature. So how do you see that, and also the social media influence? So that's my...
One point is that when you are talking about popularity of literature from Russia, you used to have 3 publication houses, small ones, Progress Publishers, Soviet land, three of them, they were dedicated towards publication, translation, which Mr. Goel and Ambassador Sharma has mentioned. With the globalization process, what has happened is literature has taken backbench. You are talking about social media, personal creation, personal creativity has taken the fore than creating a market for popular literature with wide acceptance. Three things we can do. One point has been made. Can we consciously promote translation of our major languages, our major literature into major foreign languages through connectivity between the persons who are active in the literature field? One. Two, as diplomats, what our role be? We are promoting lots of visual arts, lots of performing arts. But as you said, the 1.2 million workers in 2 countries of Middle East, can I translate the diaspora literature from Malayali for them? What embassy can do? Some of these are the points. Let's listen.
I want to look at the Swamis and the Babas that you were talking about. No, it's a very valid point. It's a very valid point. It is something like when 30 years ago somebody talked about Bollywood and then they said, oh, Bollywood, intraday. See, whatever you may say, you may not agree with it, but the fact is that these Swamis and Babas are part of life. Whether you do something or not, they will still be there.
You have a question?
In India and abroad. And therefore, what I think we can do is कि कम से कम बात तो करेंगे वो इंडिया के बारे में, जानेंगे तो सही. Diplomats will take care of the negative impact to the best possible, but you can't avoid it. Yeah. But I think the best thing to do that in that promote the youth, promote the professional youth of India, and they will provide the counter narrative.
So I think there's a question in front. We have 2 or 3, so we'll come to that. Yeah, I think.
Thank you. I just have a brief comment. You raised a concern about translations not being done. But what I found is that even works which are translated actually don't get noticed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Among readers abroad.
Yeah.
To give you an example, this the book which was longlisted for the Booker, the international Booker, Pyre, the Tamil book, which was written in 2013.
This Murugan's.
Perumal Murugan's book. 2017 or 18 it was translated and the translation was published. But it gets longlisted for the Booker in 2022.
Absolutely.
So, these time lags also...
No, I think there's a... See, this is what the next step to translation is the publishing and the pushing. So you're absolutely right that it's a very tricky landscape. The markets abroad are very restricted. The UK publishing, for instance, has been shrinking. COVID has done its bit, but even without COVID, the American publishing is very particular, very selective. They are not adventurous enough to say, "Acha, let's make it from Bihar. This is a big novel." It doesn't make sense. Most Americans, I'm sorry to say, they haven't gone beyond their state limits, and so you'd be surprised at the kind of interest there is. It's very local. So to break through all this, for an Indian publisher to break through all this, get a contract from a foreign publisher, I mean, ask me, I've been trying for 20 years, but it doesn't work. Books do very well here, but doesn't mean they translate there. So to break all this and get in there, therefore, the need, I mean, if you had a book, if I had my book done by a great translator here into Spanish, into Dutch or into French, I would be able to probably get a contract. Say that this is already done. So, does this work for you? Or it would become all that. So it's a very, very complicated. I think your point is extremely valid. To break through that, I mean, how did how did God of Small Things suddenly break through? Because overnight, it got the attraction of an agent who flew down and took it and went with it.
Kundera selling more in India.
Yeah, so I mean there was a phase when people were doing this because there was I'm not referring to this book, but there was an entire phase when people were just selling India in different ways. If you had dowry debts and you had caste and you had this, etc., then somebody would say, this is India, let me pick this up. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
We come back to you.
Currently, I was Secretary Urban Development in UP. I was nodal for the G20 event happening in UP. So I was surprised to see this topic, diplomacy and literature, because we were given instructions and I was involved in organizing events and all. We never found like you have to show some literature, only some dance form or welcome or something. It was a huge diplomatic opportunity because people from 40 countries were coming and we were involved all day and night. I was completely involved for the Banaras, for Lucknow, for Agra. I was very much part of that. But I was really surprised what to do with diplomacy of literature. Unless and until, my point is, unless and until you transform this into drama, more drama, like Kalidasa wrote so many good dramatic literature, but nobody interested in, like in UK, I was doing 1-year course in King's College. So we used to spend evening going to see some drama and all. It's very popular there. Unless until we transform literature into podcasting, more play. So whole theme, the even cultural event done by the ICCR in G20, the theme was random. It was not based on any literature or anything. We have to do a lot in this area unless until Navtesh sir was asking about what about the current thing. Only we talk about Tagore and all. Currently, people are involved in writing because if you look at the rural area and other, they are good writers, but they are not finding sync with what to do with them. So it's high time we should think on that also.
It's a comment. It's a comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this that side. This is, yeah. Yes, please. Go ahead.
नमस्कार, मैं एक आर्टिस्ट के नाते सिर्फ कुछ अपने एक दो चीज़ें बोलना चाह रही हूँ। अभी नमस्कार, अभी कुछ महीने पहले फ्रांस में कार्यक्रम में गए थे जहाँ हमें मिस्टर राहुल शर्मा और मुझे पोइट्री एंड सितार का परफॉर्म करना था और कालिदास जी के ऊपर संस्कृत डे पे कालिदास जी के कुछ श्लोकों पे हमने काम किया। मंगोलिया की एक महिला थी, उन्होंने ये कहा कि कालिदास जी का 16th सेंचुरी में ऑलरेडी वहाँ अनुवाद हो चुका है। और पिछले साल फ्रांस में एशियन आर्ट म्यूज़ियम में मेरा प्रोग्राम कुछ फ्रेंच एक्टर्स एक्ट्रेसेस के साथ था, तो उन्होंने जो आपने बात कही रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर जी का फ्रेंच में बहुत अनुवाद हुआ है और उन्होंने 19वीं सदी के कुछ फ्रेंच राइटर्स और इनका लिया और मुझे विशेष रूप से कहा कि मैं तो सिर्फ सितार बजाती हूँ, लेकिन उन्होंने कहा नहीं, हिंदी की गूंज चाहिए हमें इस म्यूज़ियम में, तो एक पार्ट पूरा आप जो टैगोर जी का है वो आप सितार बजाते हुए और वो पोएट्री परफॉर्म करेंगे। तो मैंने नहीं जानते हुए भी वो हिंदी में कुछ बोला। मतलब मैं ये बताना चाह रही हूँ कि आप जो लिटरेचर इसकी बात कर रहे हैं साहित्य की, तो हमारा भारतीय साहित्य बहुत सम्मान से देखा जाता है। और जो कल्चर की हम बात करें, मैं बहुत जल्दी मैं ख़त्म करूँगी कि मैं सितार लेके प्रोग्राम के लिए जा रही थी और वो जो टैक्सी ड्राइवर था उसने मेरी तरफ देखा साड़ी में और उसने हिंदी गाने लगा दिए फ्रांस में, पेरिस में मुझे देख के। और उसके बाद अल्जीरिया में जो अल्जीरिया के राजदूत फ्रांस में जो हैं वो मेरे शिष्य बने, मेरे से सितार सीखना चाहते थे, तो वो नूतन पे बहुत फिदा थे। उन्होंने कहा मैं जब छोटा था तब से ख्वाब देखता था कि नूतन से शादी करूं, लेकिन नूतन
तो ऊपर चली गई तो, तो उन्होंने मुझे अपना गुरु बनाया, मुझे उस्ताद कहते थे वो, और सुबह हाथ जोड़ के खड़े रहते थे। उनके नौकरों को चाय नहीं बनाने देते थे, कहते थे मेरे उस्ताद के लिए मैं चाय बनाऊंगा। मुझे अपना उन्होंने ये रखा। और उनका सबसे खास ये चीज़ थी कि वो वहाँ के सारे लोग फ़ोन करके पूछते थे कि आप प्रोग्राम के लिए आएंगे तो साड़ी ही पहन के आएंगी क्या?
Sorry to cut you short, but your story is so common, so commonly known all abroad.
Yeah.
These are all episodic appreciations, admiration for the Indian culture.
जी,
But when we talk about channelizing,
हाँ,
we have not been able to turn this into a strategy for cultural growth.
ओके।
Chaliye. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Sir, the question was of translation of a translation agency, and so sir, I was thinking that our diplomats today who are going, they have their CFL and they are learning new languages. At the same time, in today's civil service, diplomacy in particular, the background of new diplomats is much diverse from every part of India. So can we involve those young diplomats, the ones who are interested, to
Young IPS will involve.
No, I get your point, but you know it's a nice thought, but it doesn't work in real world. The young diplomats, a diplomat has to be genuinely, passionately interested in literature to attempt a translation. And you see people here, but everybody has different passions. You know, somebody likes drones, somebody likes basketball, etc. Second, then they are just not just there sitting doing CFL. You know, their CFL they are virtually doing in the time they have left over after office. So they go to class, they come to office, they go do their homework, they do write reports, they are sent to the airport to meet delegations. So it's not an easy life. And half that, if they are married, then they have to take care of the family. If they are alone, they have to go and make sure they get a meal. So it's not very easy. So I would rather, and if you're talking of literature, once you call a book literature, you presume it's got a certain quality. Now, literature translation is not everybody's cup of tea. It's an as creative an art. We come back to at the back. You have a question? Yes, sorry, please. Yeah, okay. We'll come back.
Yeah, sorry, okay, it's fine. Okay, my name is Maria, I'm basically from Poland, and I wasn't going to speak, but then I heard Smita say something, and you said, these are episodic things. Then I thought, you see, in diplomacy, whatever type of diplomacy, we cannot ignore human factor. You see, all of us weave our lives from those episodic things. We should put them into something. So, if she has had this experience, it would be beautiful if she could tell it to other people. Put it on FM in the morning. People will hear about it. They love it. I'll give you an example from my own life. Like in 2014, Poland was a guest of honor at the book fair in Delhi. In Delhi. What happened? Some sort of minister or somebody, they visited in 2013, and they suddenly say, okay, let's have Poland as the book fair, Polish ministry and India. So we had the book fair, whatever it is. And one of the journalists from Poland, took my small interview. I get very scared, but so it was like just 2-3 minutes clip, which they put on FM in the morning when everybody is going by car at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. All my friends phoned me and asked me about the book fair from Poland. They phoned me from Poland. They asked me about the book fair, which writers had come, which books have been translated. So what I'm trying to say is this human factor, these human stories provide a fertile ground for the future diplomacy. Yeah,
correct.
So this is my comment.
Thank you.
That is the same point he was making. How from local one can go global.
Yeah, I know, but
Yes.
to use it. I'm not contradicting you, but we can actually creatively use this type of things. I just hope whatever she said comes on the panel, on the video. I hope she had been on the other side, and other people hear about it. Thank you.
You have a question? Mic Leo.
आज जब हम अनुवाद या अपने वैचारिक साहित्य को एक दूसरे से जोड़ रहे हैं, तब हमें ये प्रश्न क्या नहीं पूछना चाहिए कि जब भारत अपनी एक राष्ट्रभाषा नहीं बना पाया, भारत की अपनी एक राष्ट्रभाषा नहीं है, उस दृष्टि से, और भारत में विविध भाषाएं हैं, संविधान में 22 भाषाएं अनुसूचित रूप में हैं, और इसके साथ ही अंग्रेजी जो कि संविधान की 22 भाषाओं में भी नहीं है, लेकिन अनुवाद की माध्यम भाषा यानी मीडियम लैंग्वेज के रूप में प्रयोग की जाती है। तो क्या यह हमारे भारतीय समाज के लिए संकट की घड़ी नहीं है कि आज तक हम अपनी किसी भारतीय भाषा को अनुवाद की माध्यम भाषा के रूप में नहीं बना पाए और अपने संपूर्ण भारतीय साहित्य को देश की विभिन्न भाषाओं तक में नहीं पहुंचा पाए? इसके साथ ही 2 क्वेश्चन और जुड़े हुए हैं, हम इसके लिए क्या कर सकते हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं?
अनुरोध करूंगा जी, आपका सवाल बहुत गंभीर सवाल है, तो तीनों सवाल एक बार में पूछने के बजाय एक एक करके पूछिए, आपको जवाब मिलेगा।
ठीक सर।
क्योंकि मेरे को फिर याद नहीं रहेगा।
ठीक है।
आपने जो पहला सवाल पूछा कि अनुवाद के लिए हम अंग्रेजी के माध्यम से ही क्यों अनुवाद करते हैं, राष्ट्रभाषा क्यों नहीं है, हम अंग्रेजी ही क्यों बोलते हैं, तो मेरा ख्याल है कि हमारी संस्कृति इतनी व्यापक है कि उसमें एक जो कि भाषा का अंकुश लगाना संभव नहीं हो पाता है ये। और दूसरी बात ये है कि जब अनुवाद करने जाते हैं, मैंने पहले भी कहा था कि जब अनुवाद करना है, अनुवाद खाली शब्दों का अनुवाद नहीं होता है ये। अगर खाली आप शब्दों का अनुवाद कर रहे हैं तो आप बेशक हिंदी से अंग्रेजी में कर लीजिए, तेलुगु से हिंदी में कर लीजिए, तेलुगु से पोलिश में कर लीजिए, उसमें आपको जो ख्याल है, जो विचार हैं, जो संवेदनाएं हैं, उन सबको भी ट्रांसलेट करना पड़ता है, अनुवाद करना पड़ता है। तो उसको अनुवाद करने में मेरा ख्याल है अगर भाषा का अंकुश ना लगे तो अनुवाद अच्छा होगा, बजाय इसके कि हम इस चक्कर में पड़े कि अंग्रेजी के थ्रू कर रहे हैं, ये क्यों कर रहे हैं। हाँ, मैं इतना जरूर कहूँगा कि हमको ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा अपनी राष्ट्रभाषा का इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए, लेकिन जैसा कि आपने खुद ही कहा, इतना बड़ा देश है, क्या ये उचित होगा कि हम कहें कि सब जगह खाली हिंदी बोली जाए?
नहीं सर,
चाहिए, वही कह रहा हूँ।
एक प्रॉब्लम ये है, हर प्रदेश में उनका साहित्य अकेडमी है, केंद्र में केंद्र साहित्य अकेडमी है। हम क्या सोच रहे हैं आपका आंसर में, ये कोलैबोरेट करना चाहिए
जी।
रीजनल जो लिटरेचर है, अच्छा लिटरेचर, उसको ट्रांसलेट करना चाहिए जी। उसमें सिलेक्ट करेंगे सबसे अच्छा कौन सा है, उसको हिंदी इंग्लिश में करिए। ये जो पॉलिसी डेवलप करना चाहिए, वही चीज़ें बोल रहे थे। लिटरेचर को पॉपुलराइज करना, लोकल से ग्लोबल होना है, ये इजी चीज़ें नहीं है, क्योंकि जो परफॉर्मिंग आर्ट्स है, विजुअल आर्ट्स है, उसका कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी दूसरा है, वो इसलिए इजीली कर देते हैं।
मैं सर इसी दिशा में मैं ये प्रश्न भी पूछना है, इसके लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं कि हमारा विविध साहित्य है, हमारी भारतीय भाषाओं में, मैं किसी भारतीय एक भाषा को थोपने की बात नहीं कर रहा था। जब एक विश्व दृष्टि हम देखते हैं तो किसी न किसी राष्ट्र की अपनी एक भाषा है, उस भाषा के साथ ही वो आगे बढ़ते हैं, फिर उसके बाद उसमें विविधता है, विविधताओं का सम्मान है। तो हम इसमें कैसे आगे बढ़ सकते हैं, इस दृष्टि पर मैं आपका विचार जानना।
I think I'll have to cut this now. बेटो बाद अभी बात करते हैं। And Abhi, there are 2 questions and then we have to wind up. I have 8 minutes, so please kindly keep it short.
While discussing diplomacy and literature and other arts, we have generally been till now talking in terms of import, export, FDI, and I think it's relevant. But my question is as a writer to the diplomats. I have been doing theater in most parts of the world. I've done theater in US, in Canada, in Kenya, in England, no problems. CGs have been inviting me, we have been interacting.
Yes.
My problem starts when my play has to be done in Pakistan. It was staged a few months back in Al-Hamra in Lahore. Now, that man who did it, I didn't do it. He was also afraid. I was also afraid. Because the play is on Manto's story, Tovatek Singh. So in that play, naturally both countries' leaders, they were criticized. So we do not know how to deal with diplomacy if there is any problem. That's question 1.
Yeah.
A small question, another question.
I think,
very
yes,
small.
we have exactly
very
5 minutes.
small question.
Yes.
We are talking about publishers. She was talking about that. My book has been published by Sahitya Academy, Plays from a Fractured Land. Those are plays on partition theme,
Right.
and writers are from both the countries.
Right.
And ironical situation is that we are not able to post the books to even to the writers who belong to
In
Pakistan.
Yeah, very valid points. Unfortunately, writers don't have answers to these points. These are always issues that come up in the real world, and they may be unfortunate, but we have to live with it. Last question at the back. The gentleman had raised his hand, and
The only question. When I have to send my books to Pakistan, or
yeah,
I have to call the from there,
yeah.
I have to go through Canada or America.
No, I can tell you one thing.
So no,
there is no difficulty in getting the books from Pakistan into India.
See,
So
I've,
if you
I've been
cannot send
posted
to
in
Pakistan,
Karachi. There is a way.
Pakistani problem. You should ask the Pakistani official.
No, this has been banned by.
Acha, yes, yes. I've been posted. I closed the mission in Karachi. If you want to send your books to Pakistan or get them from Pakistan, in Dubai there are 2 centers. Please check their addresses. That's the only way you can connect with them. Strictly they ban. Like you can go enact your play. Recordings you won't get.
We've just been joined by a very eminent audience at the last minute, so I'm sorry we missed out your participation. I have to wind this up, but I want to give the mic to Anju and request her. She would be happy to recite a short poem as a closing.
जैसे आपने इस पूरे सेशन में देखा कि हम सब ने वैचारिकता एवं साहित्य मतलब डिप्लोमेसी एंड लिटरेचर पर इतनी बात की। हम लोग बात कुछ और करना चाहते थे और बातें कुछ और हो गई, किसी और दिशा में चली गई। मुझे लगता है साहित्य का यह भी एक बहुत ही अहम पहलू है कि आप कहना कुछ चाहते हैं, लोग कुछ और समझते हैं। तो साहित्य एक ऐसी धारा है जो बहुत ही इंडिपेंडेंट बहती है। तो आप सोचते होंगे कि हम डिप्लोमेट क्या सोचते हैं जब बाहर जाते हैं। आपको अच्छा लगता होगा डिप्लोमेट की लाइफ कितनी अच्छी है। हम हवाई जहाज़ में घूमते हैं, हम 5 स्टार होटल्स में खाते हैं और हम हमेशा पार्टी करते हैं, स्कॉच पीते हैं, पर वो करते हैं परंतु ऐसा नहीं है। हम डिप्लोमेट्स भी घर को बहुत याद करते हैं। और मैंने जब ये कविता लिखी तो मैं घर को बहुत याद कर रही थी। वह कोरोना का समय था, तो हम वहाँ से मैं जब हवाई जहाज़ उड़ते देखती थी जोहान्सबर्ग से, तब मैंने ये कविता लिखी थी। इसमें है, मुझे लगता है कि जितने भी दुनिया में हवाई जहाज़ हैं, बहुत सारे हवाई जहाज़ हैं जो लोगों को इमिग्रेंट बना रहे हैं। कविता का ये भाव है, सुनिएगा। आकाश में उड़ते हवाई जहाज़, आकाश में उड़ते हवाई जहाज़, इनमें से कोई तो गुजरेगा और मेरे गांव के पीपल और बट को चूमकर मेरे गांव की खुशबू ले आएगा। पर आपको पता है हवाई जहाज़ ढोते हैं रिफ्यूजी और शरणार्थियों को, हमें पहुंचाते हैं अजनबी देशों में जहां मिलती है उपेक्षा और द्वितीय श्रेणी की नागरिकता और अल्पसंख्यक का तमगा। हवाई जहाज़ हमें घर से दूर ले जाते हैं, बनाते हैं हमें बेघर, उखाड़ते हैं हमें अपने जड़ों से और बनाते हैं नोमैड। हम उपलाते रहते हैं फाइटोप्लैंक्टन की तरह इस ध्रुव से उस ध्रुव तक। कभी नौकरी की तलाश, कभी बेहतर जीवन शैली की आश, कभी शिक्षा, कभी आवास। साइबेरियन पक्षियों से भी ज़्यादा बदतर आद्यास्त है हमारी। अक्सर हम घर का रास्ता भूल जाते हैं और गलत हवाई जहाज़ में बैठ जाते हैं। हवाई जहाज़ हमेशा घरों की तरफ नहीं उड़ते, हमेशा मिलन के मुहूर्त नहीं गढ़ते। हवाई जहाज़ हमेशा घरों की तरफ नहीं उड़ते, हमेशा मिलन के मुहूर्त नहीं गढ़ते। अक्सर उड़ा जाते हैं हमें अपने गांव, देश और ज़मीन से, बना डालते हैं हमें परों सा हल्का ताकि उखड़ सकें हम खुद ही निर्विरोध स्वीकृति से। अंतिम स्टैंजा है, तो यह हवाई जहाज़ कहाँ जा रहा है और कितनों को इमिग्रेंट बना रहा है। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, and thank you very much, thank all my panelists, and thank you to the audience. Thank you. Bye.
अभी एक फोटो लेना है।